start on one end? Okay.
Yeah.
I am Sarah Matias from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I am an MSW, licensed master social worker, and also an addiction specialist. So I have my advanced alcohol and drug counseling license, and I do a couple other things, EGALA certified and equine assisted EMDR certified. I am an EMDR specializing in complex trauma, and also do AccuDetox and just a variety of different interventions. And got into equine assisted psychotherapy about 10 years ago. And so we are in the process of developing. I volunteered for 10 years with an equine program and worked full-time with co-occurring complex, mental health and substance abuse treatment for our community mental health. So that's my primary work. And with that, specialize in treating complex trauma because that's so prevalent with addiction. But in the journey with equine therapy, we have started to work towards now developing a program together. My husband and we'll talk a little bit, but called Milagro Ranch. We don't have the ranch yet. We've seen the Milagro part. We just see an amazing, journey for people with working through different issues and with the horses. And so we're in the process of developing a program that would focus on the treatment of trauma and other mental health symptoms with the use of horses and our EMDR. And we both have military families, so that background. I'm daughter of a combat veteran, and we have our daughter is a major in the Army and a Black Hawk pilot. So she's been in for commission 12 years ago, and we both come from families of military service. So we are really passionate about addressing the just first responders, military veterans, and civilian PTSD. And my husband can talk a little bit more about some of those experiences.
All right, my name is John Matias, and I am an LPC licensed professional counselor, therapist, and I've been in the field probably 45 years. So I come from the inner city of Chicago, and so what I didn't know is that a lot of the symptoms that I was growing up with is not unlike what we see folks coming back from military service. A lot of the PTSD, shootings, a lot of the living heightened because of the neighborhood and gangs, and having to know, or eyes in the back of your head, knowing what neighborhood, who's around, and that safety. Right now my job is I am a therapist for a residential program dealing with our refugees that come across our borders illegally. And so we do a lot of the trauma assessment as they go through our legal system and getting their green cards and visas. And so it's a very different cross-cultural experience because many of these kids do not speak a lick of English. They're coming from anywhere from Africa, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Guatemala, Honduras, into our United States, and then that process of becoming U.S. citizens and all of the bridges that they have to construct in order to now be successful. So we have 2 Mustangs in Milagro Ranch, and we're really excited because we really see the value of not just talk therapy but experiential, where they can come out and actually be in a surrounding that allows them to choose to look at those areas of their lives and then perhaps work through some of that. So we're really excited here as a panel just to kind of share our experiences, I'm sure, and really give some hope, because there really is a lot of hope out there that we can heal, we can go forward, and our stories don't have to be this tragedy that we so often see and hear and experience, even in, I'm sure, in our own families. So looking forward to it.
My name is Aubriana Johnson, and I am an author, entrepreneur, podcaster. My children's book series is called Cowgirl Cameron, and in that book series is a little miniature horse named Encore, and he is my little therapy horse that I have trained, and we work with different practitioners. I guess I would be considered the equine specialist with a handler in that situation, so I'm not a mental health practitioner, but the lens that I look through is accessibility. A lot of times mental health modalities or services are not accessible to Black and brown communities. And so I am not only giving an avenue for conversation and introduction into the realm of possibility, connecting with horses and connecting kids with agriculture, but I'm also serving as a conduit to provide those services within my community in North Carolina. I also am the host of the podcast called Black in the Saddle, and on that podcast we acknowledge the impact and the influence of Black people on the horse industry. And so I've had conversations with mental health practitioners, with equine facilitated psychotherapy practitioners, and just want to bring about conversations around accessibility and things. This industry as a whole becomes easier when you see people who look like you doing it. And so shedding that light and just bringing forth those stories so that people can learn what's possible in this industry.
Oh, this is gonna be good. This is gonna be good.
No. And my name is Cheryl Erickson, and I'm also an author. And I have a master's degree in social work, but didn't go into practice. And part of that is because of my story. But I write about the horse-human relationship and the horse-human connection, but also that healing power of the horse-human relationship from my own experience living with PTSD from a trauma that I didn't have a conscious memory of. So I grew up from age 7 up to about 30, living with all these symptoms but not knowing what was going on. And because it was the 80s, it was the 90s, nobody knew what to look for. We weren't talking about it, especially in kids. And so nobody realized what was happening until I got a horse that was very, very sensitive to my energy. And that was when the things started coming out, the memories and everything started surfacing. And so it was that experience that caused me to actually go for the MSW and go into equine assisted therapy. But I didn't stay with it because it was just, for me, with my own trauma history, it was too much to sit with other people's trauma. That's not where I felt I could help people the best. So I went and turned to my writing instead, and that is how I help people, is through telling my story and doing talks about my story and sharing my experiences and how my horse helped me to look inside myself and to see what was going on and to accept that and to work with that and to move forward.
Wow.
That's cool. I think some of the things that we have wanted to explain and answer for so many people is why horses. Like, why is that? For your experience, that they made that impact, and for yours as an equine specialist, knowing the impact that they have, and as mental health providers, so much of treatment is about accessibility, how to get it paid for, how to get access. And so we've really wanted to be able to answer that more from the mental health side of it. And so just a few points, in our culture right now, the need is so tremendous, especially, post-COVID and so many other things going on in the world. The mental health crisis is obvious, I think, to everyone, but something like over 40% of people in the United States identify with mental health symptoms now. And if you go into urban areas, it's almost half of the population has been exposed to community violence and has that level of trauma. And our veterans, we talk about 22 a day with suicide, but actually the real numbers with, active duty and vets, it's 66. So it's triple what's being reported. First responders are under unprecedented stress with just all of the cultural things happening and the stressors of the last several years. Those suicide numbers are very comparable. So it's really a crisis that we're experiencing. And mental health treatment is sort of a revolving door. And one of the ways that I explain that is, and I think we know in the field of neuroscience now, with trauma, the way our brain holds on to a traumatic experience is in the sensory part of our brain. We go into fight or flight, and so we're holding on to sight, smells, sounds, feelings, emotions. We're not necessarily having that part of the brain that's logical and rational, and with our speech center, that's not accessible during the trauma. So when we're in fight or flight mode, that shuts off. And so talk therapy is tapping into the wrong part of the brain. Our prefrontal cortex is off. And so we can't talk it out and heal that way. And so that's why so many treatments are not effective, and people give up. They go to 20 different therapists. They've had every modality out there, and nothing has worked because it's not even tapping into the correct part of the brain anatomy and the nervous system. What is so powerful about equine therapy, it's really what we would call like a somatic therapy. It's tapping into the correct part of the brain for trauma. It's really getting to that nonverbal part that is functioning when we're in fight or flight. And so, the horses are responding to what we're putting out there non-verbally. When we go to an office and we're doing talk therapy, we can lie to ourselves, we can lie to the therapist, we can be completely disconnected from our reality and not even realize we're lying to ourselves or lying to the therapist. With a horse, we all know you can't lie to a horse, and horses don't lie either. So they will respond to our nonverbals, which is our affect state, where we're at emotionally. And they're tapping into that, which is why it's so incredibly powerful. We also, a lot of people, like you mentioned, the trauma is really attachment related. It's early and it's nonverbal trauma. And so we can't even articulate that. And in that case, and I've seen this as a therapist, humans are actually the threat. If we've been hurt by people, then being approached by a person is a threat. And so the therapist has to now figure out how do we get through that barrier, and that's sometimes insurmountable in an office setting. When you bring a horse into the equation, there is this safety in animals, which is why service animals and emotional support animals work. So the person who's been wounded has this experience and opportunity now to actually have a positive attachment to a horse, to an animal. And I say, I write ESA letters for people all the time so they can take their dogs and cats and stuff on flights. And, I've written them for hedgehogs and everything else that, they're emotional support. A horse is 10, 12 times larger though. So you have this huge being that is now attaching to you, and you're getting those neurochemicals that are missing, that have been, depleted or not present. And so, I'll stop and let you guys jump in because I don't want to keep going and going because I could, but I love this stuff.
I'd love to jump in on that just from my own story and experience. And because what happened to me was when I was a child, I was 7 years old, and it happened, I was sexually abused by a man that I trusted, that I thought was a safe person. And what happened, and this is part of that trauma experience, is I lost my ability to determine if people were safe or not. I no longer trusted that. Again, I was 7, you don't realize that that's a thing that's going on. These are things that I discovered later, but that carried forward in my life and has affected every relationship I've had since. Even though I know what's going on now, it continues to affect that. But to go back to the reason that horses were always comfortable for me is because the horses are what they say they are. And I understood the horses. I understood their world. I didn't understand people world at all. It was very uncomfortable for me to be in groups, to be in a lot of situations that I'm capable of being in now, but I wasn't then. So I think that's really significant. Without the neuroscience, which is important, which I also love and understand, is just that basic ability to connect with something, to see something as safe, whereas other people are not necessarily, which is one of the problems with talk therapy, which, I did get some benefit from that also. I did a lot of different modalities of therapy in my journey, but it was really my horse that made the difference in what she caused me to look at within myself. So it was far more significant than anything else I experienced, I think. So, yeah.
And that's, you talk about how you found your voice in the pen.
Yes.
I probably, like many people, I picked up a book that I couldn't put down because of the unique style of that writer that just took me to that place and took me to nuances that helped me discover stuff. So, yeah, I mean, we all have these different gifts, and there's nothing that is out of bounds. Oh, no, I can't do it that way, or I shouldn't do it like this, or whatnot. If you have that gift and you use it, and someone picks that up, and because of that, they go a step further than you've done. You've used your gift, so to speak. You really are using what you have in order to tell the story or get that person to that place. So that's really cool.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I think one of the things that I have noticed most in the work that I've been doing is that the stories that we tell ourselves, whether it be about our own experiences or about the world around us, tend to be really impacted when we start interacting with horses. A lot of times I have parents who are like, I cannot do this. I had this experience with a horse, and my uncle put me up there and smacked his butt, and we went running off. So many different stories, but because I have a little bite-sized little guy, they let that defense go down a little bit, especially when allowing their kids to interact with them. And so I found that a lot of times it's a indirect impact on the stories that the parents or the guardians are telling about themselves and what horses can do for them by allowing their kids to interact with the horses in such special ways. So I feel like this work many times not only impacts the people who are directly receiving services, but the people around them who can see the change in them and change the story that they have about what horses mean to us and in our society.
Yeah, I think it's a cool point you bring up. The horses don't know who the client is.
They don't. They don't.
And so they're responding to what they're sensing inside of us under the surface, which is the real information. It's the truth. And so sometimes, you'll realize too, if you're out there and you're having a rough day, the horse, let me take care of Ariana first before I go over here and take care of this situation. So you really have to, examine yourself in this work, because it's very, very authentic. It gets right to the core issues. One of the things I mentioned is in addiction work, breaking through that self-delusion, and the, kind of just lying to yourself that can occur when you get into that really dark, deep, addictive process. I've run group therapy with clients with addiction and mental health diagnoses, and I combine the equine part of it with EMDR and substance abuse, work, and it is invariably every single group that I've, worked with, it's the first session, and people are suddenly getting below the surface. and experiencing these emotions and this self-awareness that they are different when they walk away, that they might have been really deceiving themselves before they came in. And it's just so consistently true. And I think, as far as why horses, they're prey animals, and so that role as a prey animal, they have to be aware, they have to be reading information, or they don't survive. And it kind of goes to another level when you're working with Mustangs, or what they're experiencing. They haven't been domesticated to sort of get maybe one step away from being like that. If you're out in the wild as a Mustang, you know what's a mile away. You smell stuff, feel stuff, and you're responding before you can't even imagine. It's just like this split hair response to things. And so very much they're going to give that information back to us in an arena. If a person walks in and they're saying I'm fine, but they're really angry, or they're really afraid, or they're really aggressive. I think of an example. Another colleague out in Colorado was explaining about her veteran program. One of the dads, a vet, came in to do an equine experience, and huge guy, military, really intense, and the horse wouldn't come near him. And so he was getting, frustrated, but having to recognize what he was putting out there. And in the process had this aha moment. This is why my 16-year-old won't speak to me. I'm doing this to him, just the way I was doing it to the horse. And so that information then was transferable back to home and back to the real core issues that this dad was in there struggling with. Was, his kid was totally shut down, but he was, yelling at him and huge and imposing. So, that direct feedback is really powerful.
Yeah, I can speak to that too in my own experience. I wasn't I didn't actually have horse therapy. It was just kind of a personal experience with my horse that I speak to. But the thing that caused me to look at what was going on with her, or with me, was because her behavior towards me changed very dramatically one day. We had been very, very close, and I'd come in the barn and she'd put her head out in the stall and she'd want to see me and she'd be excited, and I'd put her halter on and I'd get her out and tie her up to brush her, and then all of a sudden she's just like this. She's constant moving. And I'm like, what's going on? It's like, I had been a horse trainer. I knew how to fix this behavior, but I wanted to know why she was doing it. I didn't understand. And so I got curious about the behavior. Long story short, I tried to tell her exactly everything that I was feeling and experiencing, because this happened while I was recovering my memories and while I was doing my master's degree program, and there's all these things going on. So I said to her, Farletta, this is what's happening. This is what I'm feeling. These memories are coming up. I don't know what's going on. I don't understand. I do know that we are safe and that it's not about you, and that I'm working on this and we're going to get through this. And I told her everything right out loud, and she just, her whole demeanor, she dropped back down, and everything was fine. And what happened with us in that relationship, and this is what I write about, is that she became a barometer to my internal struggles throughout our lives together. I had her for 16 years.
Wow.
And every time her behavior would change, I would be like, there's something here that I'm not dealing with. And it would make me curious. And that is how I got on my path to healing, after ignoring for 25 years everything that I felt, and living from the neck up is what I call it, just all right here. This is a place I can hang out and feel relatively safe, but not wanting to feel anything that was in my body. And that was just not acceptable to her. And that, I think, is a very powerful story of one of the ways that horses can help us in that way. And because we had such a relationship like that, I'm not sure that other people would have the exact type of experience, but it's the same thing. She was so sensitive to my energy that she just was unwilling to allow me to continue the way that I was. And it obviously changed my life, saved my life. So, yeah.
I love that. Thank you.
I think another arena that and you were kind of mentioning it, and that is certainly in urban areas, but with Black and brown people. And so how do you engage, especially if you don't have access to this, being in the inner city? I was fortunate that at an early age, someone started a youth ministry that took us out of the city and into a setting like this, and it was a freak out. The closest that I had come was a farm in the city in Chicago. In the lakefront, there was literally a small farm, so you can go in and see the cows and so forth. That was our farm experience in the city. But to actually go and live, and then get on a horse, and then ride it, and feel the exhilaration. I was free, I was safe, I didn't have to worry about anything. All of a sudden, it really opened up a whole world to me that started to really transform me. But then I had to go back and face the reality that I was going to be in an unsafe, I was going to be in situations where it was racial, and so it was a mixed community of Polish, African American, Ukrainian, and there I was, a Puerto Rican kid in the midst of that, and all of the racial things that were happening in the 60s and 70s as I was growing up as a teenager. And so, but to be able to then engage in that and really show that we can be part of that world, and that world can be part of us, but we can also go back into our world and then have tools to be able to engage in a very different way. We need more of those conversations. The other thing I want to say too is that whoever's listening out there, you need to speak to your Department of Human Services and challenge them in the services that they are providing. Limited talk therapy, especially in the urban context, with substance abuse co-occurring, so you have mental health and substance use issues. We need more choices in proximity to the cities. You can drive 10 minutes out of most cities and be out of the city or so forth. So I think we need to make those partnerships much more readable. Certainly the insurance companies out there, you need to make those codes available so that these kinds of services can be had, because the value that it gives is that it allows the healing process to actually speed up quicker, and you can heal from that, especially if you have the tools to go back into your context and continue to live where you have to live. So
yeah, I think that there's a larger conversation to have about how we can be creative in connecting these services with the people who need them the most. And a lot of times it takes the advocacy of people who either might not be utilizing the services or know someone who is running a program 30 minutes outside of the city, or has connections in the city government who can say, you know what, did you know about this? Did you know about this experience? Let me give you a story of someone who's gone through this. A lot of times it takes advocates outside of the industry, whether it be equine assisted services in general or mental health. It takes advocates outside of those industries to pull in the connections and form partnerships that they can be pilots. They can start off as pilots, you know. What I do know about horse people is you get us a foot in the door and we'll kick it down. But we need the foots in the door. And so if that's the question, like, what can I do to help facilitate these? Bring the authors to your school. Definitely. And just connect different professionals that you might not think would be connected. Professional development, I know that's not mental health services. There is a line between equine facilitated learning and equine facilitated psychotherapy. But there are conversations that can get people introductions that make it easier for these services to be offered in your local area.
And even in this, so you know, a therapist and then an equine specialist, that collaboration and that information exchange live makes such a difference, particularly in healthy relationships. So they see healthy relationships happening, it's being modeled, and then and the horses facilitate that. Very powerful tools. I can take that back with me. So I have 4 kids that I have to manage and a husband. You know, I know you got to sometimes, you know, treat us like children. They're laughing, but then, you know, we have those relationships that we can work out of and off of. So really important, these collaborations.
You know, just talking about back to some of the things that you guys are sharing and the urban experience, I think what I see in the population that I'm working with trauma and understanding that better, I think we're seeing that so much in, like I mentioned at the beginning, in first responders and military and vets, urban kids, a lot of similar experiences. And where the risk comes in for substance use and addiction is that those traumatic experiences deplete your neurochemicals, and so that self-medicating is an enormous risk. And this is the other piece that animals and then horses in particular, I think, you know, the size and all of those issues, they're bringing in the same neurochemicals. When we attach to an animal, we're getting a release of oxytocin, we're getting a release of dopamine. Those are the chemicals we get from drugs and alcohol. So as we were discussing first responders earlier, my husband brought up the point, think of the cop shows that you watch on TV. At the end of a tough day, what is every single scene? It's in a bar. It's in a bar.
Exactly.
Right?
True story.
So get some dopamine and decompress, right? Go to a horse, get some dopamine, and decompress. That's how we explain it to the funding source.
Leave your money on the bar. I said, and still leave your money on the bar.
Exactly. Don't develop an addiction. Well, maybe you might want to buy a horse then. You know, all the rest. So
Leave it in the barn, not the bar.
That's right. There you go.
Addiction. Yeah.
I like that phrase.
I know, I just came up with it.
What'd you say?
I said, leave it in the barn, not in the bar.
Leave it in the bar. That is a really good one. That could be a tagline for a whole marketing plan.
Leave it in the barn. That's a good one.
So, you know, and I think like we've seen some of the videos on Horses for Mental Health, phenomenal website. There's video on there at Abijah's up in Minneapolis, and they have worked really extensively with getting legislation passed for first responders to have this as wellness treatment. Instead of waiting to the point where somebody is suicidal and on the brink, that if you've had, you know, an experience where, you know, you're going to need to work through it and had a tough day, this can be on the menu of you need to go out to the barn. You need to go and just spend a couple hours. And we understand from the neuroscience part of it and the mental health side of it what it's doing, and it's actually doing something. And it's not just kind of like a one-dose thing and then, okay, I got to keep going back and back and back. Yeah, I mean, that's great. But I have, in the groups that I've ran, wanting to collect data, do pre and post tests, and measure with all of the assessment tools, you know, the PTSD, PCL-5 scales, the GAD, anxiety and depression, and Edinburgh, you know, self-efficacy. All of those scales show statistically significant long-term impact of equine therapy, and we're talking like in 6 weeks, that 6 months and 12 months down the road, there is a statistically significant drop in anxiety and all of these other measures. So it has a lasting impact. There is a transformation, like you're describing, that has a lasting impact. And I've observed it in people that, so you had your horse for 16 years, and I see it when I have a client come for 6 weeks to a group, and a horse makes a connection, and they'll make a connection, they'll be drawn to a certain horse and have an experience, and they're talking to me 6 months down the road about that experience still.
Wow.
Still.
It lasts. It's a core memory shift, you know, leaving stuff in the barn, like you said, they leave it in the barn, and. So, that's I think where our name Milagro Ranch came out of. We still don't have the ranch part of it, but, we've seen those impacts, and it's very miraculous to see.
What does Milagro mean?
Miracle in Spanish.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just popped into our heads, and we're like, we're running with that. So
I love it.
we're in Michigan right now, but we're originally, from Chicago, and in the past year have been working on a collaboration in the Chicago area to head back to that part of the country and that whole huge demographic, and our passion, and I started out working with Gang of All Kids 35 years ago in Chicago, and just instinctively, without growing up with horses or growing up on a farm, but knowing the impact of animals, took a group of gang members out to a farm and saw this impact from the get-go.
Yeah.
And it just it sticks with you.
Yeah.
And so it's an incredibly powerful tool. And now that we've got all the brain science and brain scans, we can see why.
Yeah.
So it's really something we all need from whatever avenue we're coming from to promote and propel that forward.
Okay.
And I think another, if I were to use a word picture, would be, to drop a pebble in a lake and you see the cascade that comes from that initial impact. And I think equine and that piece is that, but then it cascades out to the rest of their life or to where they have to go to. But the lasting effect is a critical difference there. And that was that equine experience, and certainly, the counseling aspects that go with that. We do want to open up for questions, right? If anyone has any questions that they want to ask. So.
You're in North Carolina. Where in North Carolina?
I am between Chapel Hill and Goldsboro, so I get around. But yeah.
I'm in the Triad area, but I have a coworker who has asked me about equine learning for her daughter.
Okay. Well, like I tell all the kids that I get to see, I have land with a fence. I don't necessarily have a farm. So I put my little mini in the back of my minivan and we go places. So it is a traveling operation, and the Triad is right down the street. So let's have a conversation. Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
I didn't even know
Right.
that. Yeah, that's so cool.
We found some people.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you all. I've been just really tuned in for so many reasons. I'm a mental health nurse by background, also spent a decade as a police officer. So when you were talking, that is just really hit home with what you take home with you. And I'll add food to the mix.
Yes. Addiction's addiction.
That was nice, right?
Yeah.
And you don't realize because you get so skilled at detaching.
Yes.
And you just go through the motions every day. And horses have always been a safe space for me, and wanting to now return that to people as you're doing. My question is, you had mentioned some research about how successful that horses and humans and that healing is. Would you be able to recommend even afterwards some places where I could look into that? In the future, I'm working currently as towards equine assisted living, natural livemanship, and want to be able to do this. And there's so many barriers. You mentioned insurance, all of those things are in play, transportation, people of color, all of these different. It can be overwhelming because you want to help everyone,
Right.
and I have to narrow it down. But I'm really interested in some of the research to support, to be able to show people who are disbelieving that this is a real modality that has real value. Somatically, you mentioned out in the outdoors, getting that fresh air, all of that together. So really value what you've all contributed in sharing your stories as well. It's so powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say when the equine facility that I was on the board of for the last 7 years, that's right in the city. We got a property in the city. So when I was working there and would take clients to that farm, it was on the bus line and it was in the city. It was, small, but getting onto the property, a lot of my clients who are urban, I'm in a Medicaid-funded, grant-funded program, would say, this is the safest I've ever felt. I don't feel safe. I can't take my kids in the yard. They'll get shot. I can't, all of those things. And so, yeah, that safety piece is huge. And the serenity, the nature therapy, it's huge. Just being, walking in the dirt and there's so many parts of it. And also what you're doing with taking your mini out there is powerful too, because that is a way to go into places and take this, into schools, into crisis situations, into hospitals, into nursing homes, all of these different ways to do it. Yeah. There's a lot of creative methods, to get this to people. Horses for Mental Health. I know Lisa, who is the coordinator of all of this. There's some websites if you go on the EQUUS Film and Mustang Summit website. But Horses for Mental Health has phenomenal resources on it. There was a woman yesterday from the Research Foundation.
Horse and Human
Research Foundation.
Yeah.
EGALA has some research on their website. I'm a research geek, so when I first, got into therapy, I was like, okay, this is like, I got to know why this works. So I dove right into it, and the reason I pursued and kept going with it, besides the fact that I'm seeing what I'm seeing, but I want to know why, was there was research on Department of Corrections, like I feel like it was in Tennessee or somewhere, where they were getting these incredibly low, going from like 80% recidivism to like under 18%. Now Randy Helm's program that's been around for years, but Department of Corrections in Arizona with Gently Mustangs, 0 recidivism rate for high risk repeat offenders in the prison system, felons, 0 recidivism. So they're seeing similar results with PTSD in the military with equine programs with Gently Mustangs. So, that parallel too with Mustangs and PTSD and military coming back into re-entering and finding their place, the Mustang parallels that. And so that connection is so just organic for those programs and why they work.
And the research is emerging. So hopefully, Lisa, where are you? Can start a link where really we can start dumping the research there, so that we can benefit from what others are writing and documenting, so that again we can build a case. I happen to be part of a mental health board in Grand Rapids, Michigan called Network 180. And we service about 200,000 people through mental health grants that we get, about 200 million. So we have to bring these kinds of services and data to them to say, how do we make that connection? Certainly, with urban and then veterans, first responders, obviously they're all in that proximity everywhere in our country. And so, if we're getting success, we can share that across state lines and really start getting the funding to shift more to be able to make it more accessible, and then these partnerships happening. And like this, where you can be mobile and bring in, I mean, what's better in having a group of fourth graders where you go to and you're able to disarm them enough to talk, inner talk, and then come back with some tools and giving teachers and administrators those tools to utilize with their teachers and so forth. So it's really critical that we have these conversations. The other thing too, in terms of the social work field, 80% of it is white female. And our society is having problems, racial problems. And so we have to overcome those barriers. We certainly need more people like us in that, but we also need to teach cross-cultural skills to those folks that are going into these master's programs, whether it's social work or professional licensure, so that because most likely my wife is going to get a whole lot of people of color in her line of work. Well, and so am I. But I'm also going to get white people too. I mean, let's just talk honestly. And I have to be able to convince you that I'm safe enough, even though I look like I do. But so does she, and so does she, and so do you. Yeah. To say, hey, we can connect here, and then, well, you know what, you're really safer. You know what, you're more safer than some other folks that I think should be safer. And all of a sudden, those conversations come out of that. Imagine the healing that takes place cross-culturally that way. I remember sitting across a white guy in a trailer home with his gun out. I'm like, sir, you can't have that out. You got to put that away. You gonna make me? No, I'm not gonna make you, but I am gonna get up on out of here. And all of a sudden, we started to have a conversation about what was going on in this, why I was there in the first place. Because, man, I've never met a person like you. And I knew exactly what he was talking about. I knew that I had to make that connection and bridge with him to be able for him to receive the services because they were needed, they were mandated, court mandated. Or I could have said no, but it made a difference there therapeutically, but I knew it also made a cross-cultural bridge. Some of his defenses about people like me, were deconstructed in that therapeutic relationship. So we have to know that going into these master's program, hey, we need a broader array of cross-cultural skills that we teach our therapists going into the field so that they can actually, when they hear it, they see it, ooh, I think I know what's going on. Let me probe that, or let me connect with that so that I can go further to do what I'm here to do, which is help that person heal and go further or deal with that issue of why we're there in the first place with them. So that's critical too. And I think this avenue of equine is allowing us to have those conversations. Yeah.
I just, on a personal note, wanted to add, because you guys are in Grand Rapids, I grew up in Kalamazoo, went to school at Western Michigan University.
That's where I got my master's.
So our social work program, at least when I was in it, they were starting to do some of that diversity training. They were doing poverty simulations and stuff like that, so to help us understand more about people that we are less familiar with, and situations that we're less familiar with. So,
well, and I know when he has brought groups of kids to do equine therapy, and they're from Afghanistan and Honduras and Guatemala, all of a sudden the language barrier kind of decreases because the horse is nonverbal communication. So you take that out of the equation, and a lot of them have had rural experiences. They're coming into the States and now they're in a city. It's totally unfamiliar, and you put them with an animal and it's like, oh, well, I had a horse in Afghanistan. Yeah. So, the bridging is amazing with animals that can happen. So,
I know we're running short on time. Do you guys want to talk about how to contact, if people want to contact you? Or anything, or your websites?
Sure. We don't have our website. We are in the process of developing.
When you go to our website, it'll say coming soon. And it is. It'll be there.
Yeah. So our horses right now are at the Mustang Adoption Academy with Sky, who's one of the gentlers down here. So we've had them for a year. But
Rio and Santiago are their names, by the way.
Do y'all have social media?
We are not there yet. So we are in the total development stage of our program. So we've got email, if you wanted to email. But
what's your email address?
Mine is sarah.matias, so my first name, last name, at comcast.net.
And it's jmatias at comcast.net.
Awesome. And yours?
I'm a lot of places.
So you mentioned your podcast is Black in the Saddle.
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
So the podcast is Black in the Saddle. You can learn more about that at blackinthesaddle.com. It's BLK in the Saddle because Black was taken. And then you can learn more about the children's book series at cowgirlcameron.com. We are those same handles, BLK in the Saddle and Cowgirl Cameron, all over social media.
Awesome.
My website is my title of my first book, which is followmefriendbook.com. And I just wanted to show them to you real quick. So the first one, Follow Me Friend, about my experience growing up with PTSD from a trauma I didn't have a conscious memory of and how my horse helped me heal. Second one is a continuation of that journey. It's called I've Never Been to Me. And it is, every time people hear that, they're like, whoa. And that's exactly what this story is about, is how I spent my entire existence trying to figure out who I was and looking every single place except for where I should. And this horse who's there on the cover, my horse, is the one who taught me to look right here. And that's what this story is about. And that was her last lesson to me. So she did pass away 2 years ago, which about killed me. But, and then this one is a culmination of what Parletta, my horse, taught me. It's called Horse Listening, and it's a book that's also, it's part book, it's part journal. So it's kind of a hybrid situation, and it talks about horse behavior and horse communication and bringing gratitude and positive intention to the horse. But also, the reason I wrote it is because if I hadn't been curious about my horse's behavior, I wouldn't have learned all of the things about myself that I learned. So the front is text, the back is a 90-day journal. It's for time with you and your horse. Great for clients, great for people who own a horse, great for a lot of situations. It's brand new. I'm really excited about it, if you can't tell. So,
You should be.
That's that. Awesome. So yeah, they're also all on Amazon, which, yeah, so. And that's it for me. So you can find everything through my website. I do, yep, back there at the table, I've got books.
Oh, the crowd goes wild.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.